Welcome to Scientific Serenity. Tonight, we travel back not just thousands, but hundreds of millions of years. We journey to a time when the Earth was a stranger to itself, a world of shallow, sun-drenched seas and barren continents, to a moment in deep time when life, after billions of years of quiet, microscopic experimentation, suddenly exploded into a carnival of bizarre, beautiful, and utterly unfamiliar forms. This is the story of the Cambrian Explosion, life's great creative outburst, and the cast of creatures so strange they seem to be drawn from a dream. This is not a list of monsters, but the story of life's first, bold attempts to invent the animal. Our story begins approximately 541 million years ago, at the dawn of the Cambrian period. For the preceding 3 billion years, life on Earth had been a slow, patient affair. It was a world of microbes, of mats of bacteria, of simple, soft-bodied organisms drifting in the oceans. Then, within a window of perhaps 20 to 25 million years, a blink in geological time, almost every major animal body plan we know today appeared in the fossil record, alongside many that have no modern equivalent. This was the Cambrian Explosion. It was as if evolution, having mastered the basic rules of multicellularity, suddenly tried every conceivable design all at once. The primary window into this lost world is the Burgess Shale, a fossil deposit high in the Canadian Rockies of British Columbia. Discovered in 1909 by paleontologist Charles Doolittle Walcott, the Burgess Shale is a time capsule of exquisite preservation. Fine mudslides buried creatures in an oxygen-poor environment, preserving not just their bones, but the delicate impressions of their soft tissues, muscles, guts, gills, and even eyes. It is here that we meet the true oddities, the characters in evolution's first great drama. One of the most iconic and puzzling of these creatures is hallucigenia. When first reconstructed, it seemed like a creature from a surrealist painting. It was pictured walking on rigid, stilt-like spines, with a row of soft, tentacular appendages waving from its back. For decades, scientists debated which end was up, which side was the back, and what in the world it was. Later, with the discovery of better preserved fossils and similar creatures from Chinese deposits like the Chengjiang, the picture flipped. The tentacles were actually legs. The stilts were defensive spines along its back. Hallucigenia was a small, worm-like creature that walked on paired, soft legs and was protected by a row of sharp spines. It is now considered a member of the Lobopodians, a group related to the ancestors of modern arthropods and velvet worms. Its story is a testament to how first impressions in paleontology can be gloriously wrong, and how patience and new discoveries can turn a nightmare into a sensible, if still alien animal. Then there was Anomalocaris, the abnormal shrimp. For years, its body parts were found separately and misidentified. Its circular, jaw-like mouth was thought to be a primitive jellyfish. Its sleek, flexible appendages, designed for grasping prey, were classified as shrimp tails. Its large, segmented body was considered a type of sponge. It wasn't until the 1980s, through the work of paleontologists like Harry Whittington and Derek Briggs, that the pieces were finally assembled. The result was a revelation. Anomalocaris was a predator, the apex hunter of the Cambrian seas. It could grow over a meter long, enormous for its time. It propelled itself through the water with flexible lobes along its sides, and used its formidable frontal appendages to capture trilobites and other prey, bringing them to its circular, toothed mouth. It had large, complex eyes, some of the first sophisticated visual systems in the animal kingdom. Anomalocaris was not just an oddity. It was the prototype of the predator, proof that the evolutionary arms race between hunter and hunted began almost as soon as complex animals appeared. And we cannot forget Opabinia, with its 5 eyes on stalks and a long, flexible, claw-tipped proboscis that extended from the front of its head like a vacuum cleaner hose. Opabinia looks like a child's drawing of an alien. It was a small creature, only a few centimeters long, and its lifestyle is still debated. It likely used its unique proboscis to probe the soft seafloor mud for food. Opabinia represents a branch of the evolutionary tree that left no modern descendants, an experiment in animal design that was tried and then abandoned. It is a ghost of a possibility, a reminder that the history of life is filled with roads not taken. These creatures, and dozens of others like Wawaxia, covered in scales and spines, Pikaia simple, early chordate that may be our very distant ancestor, and the armored trilobites that would come to dominate the seas, all shared the same stage. They lived in a world without plants on land, without fish in the seas, without anything we would recognize as a forest or a reef. Their world was a submerged alien landscape of microbial mats and sponge gardens. And in this world, they were the pioneers, testing out the very ideas of what an animal could be, how to move, how to eat, how to defend, how to perceive. The Cambrian Explosion was not a random event. Scientists believe it was driven by a perfect storm of environmental and biological factors. Rising oxygen levels, the evolution of predation, which drove an arms race of adaptation, and perhaps most importantly, the evolution of genetic toolkits that allowed for the rapid development of complex body plans. It was life's first great act of artistic expression, a burst of evolutionary creativity that has never been matched. As you listen, imagine yourself floating in those warm, shallow seas. Around you, the sleek form of Anomalocaris glides silently. On the seafloor, Hallucigenia picks its way delicately over the mud. Opabinia, with its bouquet of eyes, scans for a meal. This was not a world of monsters, but a world of inventors. Every spine, every eye, every tentacle was a new idea, an experiment in survival. And from these wild, wonderful experiments, all future animal life would eventually descend. The bizarre menagerie of the Cambrian seas was not a chaotic free-for-all, but a complex ecosystem governed by the same fundamental rules that shape life today: competition, predation, and adaptation. The strange forms we find in the Burgess Shale and similar deposits are the physical solutions to the problems of survival in this new, crowded world of animals. To understand them, we must look beyond their alien appearance and see the engineering challenges they solved. Consider the humble trilobite. While not as outwardly bizarre as Opabinia, trilobites were one of the Cambrians' greatest success stories, diversifying into thousands of species that would dominate the oceans for hundreds of millions of years. Their innovation was a masterstroke of modular design, a segmented body encased in a hard, calcite exoskeleton. This armor provided protection from the newly evolved predators, like Anomalocaris. Their bodies were divided into 3 lobes, hence the name: head, thorax, and tail, allowing for flexibility and a variety of lifestyles. Some burrowed, some swam, some crawled along the seafloor. Many had complex, compound eyes made of calcite crystals, giving them some of the earliest sophisticated vision. The trilobite was a versatile platform, and its success lay in its adaptability. It was the Swiss Army knife of the Cambrian. But armor alone wasn't enough. The evolutionary arms race spurred innovation in weaponry and mobility. Anomalocaris, with its grasping appendages and powerful swimming lobes, represented the pinnacle of Cambrian predatory technology. Its success, however, put pressure on its prey. This is where we see the true wonder of the Cambrian Explosion, the explosive diversification of defensive strategies. Wawaxia looked like a miniature, armored sea porcupine. It was covered in overlapping scales and sported 2 rows of long, menacing spines along its back. It was likely a grazer, scraping microbial mats from the seafloor, but its formidable spines were a clear deterrent to would-be predators. Its body plan was another unique experiment, a lineage that flourished for a time and then vanished. Other creatures developed different strategies. Some, like the early mollusks, began to experiment with simple, conical shells. Others may have relied on burrowing or camouflage. The seafloor became a battlefield of innovation, with each new defensive adaptation selecting for new predatory countermeasures. Amidst this frenzy of armored arthropods and soft-bodied oddities, a quieter, but ultimately more significant, revolution was taking place. Pikaia, a small, lancelet-like creature found in the Burgess Shale, possessed a notochord, a flexible rod running along its back. This structure is the defining feature of the phylum Chordata, the group that includes all vertebrates, including us. Pikaia was not a fish. It had no jaw, no fins, no backbone, but it had the foundational blueprint. It likely swam with a simple, undulating motion, filtering food from the water. In the grand carnival of the Cambrian, Pikaia was an unassuming participant. Yet, within its simple body lay the seed of a future that would eventually walk on land, fly in the air, and contemplate its own origins. Why did this explosion of form happen specifically in the Cambrian? Scientists point to a confluence of factors creating an unprecedented evolutionary playground. Oxygen levels in the atmosphere and oceans had risen significantly, providing the metabolic fuel for larger, more active bodies. The evolution of predation created a powerful selective pressure for innovation, to eat and to avoid being eaten. But perhaps the most crucial factor was genetic. Research into evo-devo, evolutionary developmental biology, suggests that just before the Cambrian, animals evolved a sophisticated toolkit of regulatory genes, like the Hox genes, which act as master switches during embryonic development, controlling where body segments, limbs, and other features form. This genetic toolkit provided the flexibility to generate a vast array of body plans from a similar set of instructions. It was as if evolution had been given a new set of Lego blocks with universal connectors, allowing for wild new constructions that were previously impossible. The Cambrian explosion was not an end point, but a spectacular beginning. It set the stage for everything that was to come. But this wild burst of creativity could not last forever. The world was changing. The continents were shifting. Sea levels were fluctuating. And the evolutionary dynamics themselves were shifting. The age of pure, unconstrained experimentation was giving way to an age of refinement, specialization, and new challenges. The next great acts in life's story would see animals conquering new realms, the depths of the ocean, the freshwater rivers, and eventually, the empty, windswept lands above. The vibrant, experimental world of the Cambrian could not last forever. Evolutionary explosions, like fireworks, burn bright and then fade, leaving behind a transformed landscape. The Cambrian period did not end with a cataclysm, but with a gradual shift. The wild, unconstrained experimentation gave way to consolidation. Some body plans proved more versatile, more durable than others. The trilobites continued their dominance. The chordates, like Pikaia, persisted as a quiet, promising lineage. But many of the most bizarre forms, hallucigenia, Opabinia, and Amalacrus, vanished from the fossil record, their unique blueprints retired from life's workshop. They were not failures, but first drafts. Their legacy was not in descendants, but in the proof of concept. Life could be this way. The end of the Cambrian period and the transition into the Ordovician saw the seas become deeper, cooler, and more oxygenated. New ecological niches opened. Life began to build more permanent structures. The first true reefs, constructed by sponge-like organisms called archaeocyathids, and later by corals. The stage was being set for the next act. The Great Ordovician biodiversification event, where life would diversify not in body plans, but in species, filling every available niche in the marine world with variations on the Cambrian themes. But before we leave the Cambrian behind, let's linger for a moment on its deepest lesson. The Cambrian explosion is often called life's Big Bang. but a more apt metaphor might be that of an artist's first major exhibition. After a long apprenticeship with simple forms, life suddenly displayed every technique, every style, every bold color it could muster. Some styles were never repeated. Others became classics, refined over millennia. What we see in the Burgess Shale is not a collection of monsters, but a gallery of possibilities. It shows us that the history of life is not a straight, predetermined line leading to us, but a branching, chaotic, wonderfully creative process filled with alternative paths, dead ends, and brilliant, fleeting ideas. This understanding brings a deep comfort. We, Homo sapiens, are not the inevitable pinnacle of evolution. We are simply one current outcome of a process that, 500 million years ago, tried out creatures with 5 eyes and vacuum cleaner noses, with stilt-walking spines and circular jaws. We are part of a story that is far grander, stranger, and more humbling than any tale of progress. Our existence is the result of countless experiments, most of which are lost to time, a few of which persevered and transformed. So as you listen now, let the images of these ancient seas soften in your mind. Let Anomalocaris fade into a shadow. Let hallucinogenous spines dissolve. Let Opabinia's many eyes gently close. What remains is the feeling of immense creative potential, of a universe that is capable of generating such bizarre and beautiful forms, of a planet that is a continuous work of art in progress. You are connected to that creative pulse. The same genetic toolkits that sculpted those Cambrian oddities are still at work in your own body, guiding the development of your limbs, your eyes, your spine. You carry within you the deep, ancient legacy of that first great explosion of animal form. You are not separate from that strange, ancient world. You are its current, conscious expression. Now, as this chapter closes, the sounds of the shallow, warm Cambrian sea begin to recede. The bubbling, gurgling, bustling noise of small, strange life slowly fades, replaced by a deeper, more solemn, and rhythmic sound, the slow, powerful heartbeat of geological time itself. The experiment of the Cambrian is over, but the story of life is just beginning. The next chapters will see life growing larger, venturing into new realms, and facing crises that will test its resilience to the breaking point. But that is a tale for another night. For now, rest with the knowledge that our world was once a place of pure, unfettered biological imagination. It was a time when the rules were being written, and anything seemed possible, and in a way it still is. The Cambrian teaches us that life is fundamentally creative, adaptive, and surprising. That same creativity flows through the tree of life, all the way to you, lying here, listening to a story that began in the mud of an ancient sea. Our journey through deep time now carries us forward, past the carnival of the Cambrian, through the rise of fish and the colonization of land, into an age where the continents were unrecognizable and the seas were ruled by a new kind of monarch. Not fish, not invertebrates, but reptiles. This is the Mesozoic era, the age of reptiles, and while dinosaurs claimed the land, the oceans witnessed an equally spectacular evolutionary drama. This is the story of the great marine reptiles, creatures that turned back to the water, reshaping their bodies into forms as elegant and powerful as any whale, and dominating the seas for over 150 million years. Theirs is a story of profound transformation, of evolutionary audacity, and of a world where sea monsters were not myth, but daily reality. Our story begins not in the water, but on land. The ancestors of all these great marine reptiles were terrestrial, lizard-like creatures. In the Permian and early Triassic periods, some of these reptiles, driven by competition, changing climates, or the lure of abundant food in the shallows, began to venture back into the sea. It was a momentous reversal. Their ancestors had crawled out of the water to conquer the land. Now, they were returning. Evolution, ever pragmatic, began to remodel them for this new, aquatic life. The first major group to achieve dominance were the ichthyosaurs, the fish lizards. Their evolution is one of the most stunning examples of convergent evolution in history. They did not merely adapt to the sea. They perfected the form for it. Over millions of years, their limbs transformed into streamlined paddles. Their bodies became sleek and torpedo-shaped. Their tails developed powerful, crescent-shaped flukes, and their snouts elongated into tooth-filled spears perfect for catching fish and squid. Some ichthyosaurs, like Ophthalmosaurus, evolved enormous eyes, the largest of any vertebrate, relative to body size, to see in the deep, dark waters. They gave birth to live young at sea, fully severing the tie to land. They became so fish-like, so perfectly adapted to open water swimming, that when the fossils were first discovered, they were mistaken for fish. The ichthyosaur was a reptile that had reinvented itself as the Mesozoic equivalent of a dolphin, but the seas were vast, and different niches demanded different designs. While ichthyosaurs ruled the open water, another group took command of the coastlines and shallows, the plesiosaurs. Their body plan was the antithesis of the ichthyosaur's fluid elegance. Plesiosaurs were built like biological rowboats. They possessed compact, barrel-shaped torsos, and most strikingly, for enormous, wing-like paddles. They likely flew through the water, flapping their paddles in a graceful, underwater flight. Their necks were often extraordinarily long, sporting small heads. Elasmosaurus, one of the most famous, had a neck that contained over 70 vertebrae, longer than its body and tail combined. This design made them not pursuit predators, but ambush hunters. They could stealthily approach schools of fish or squid, the small heads and long necks snaking out with lightning speed. Other plesiosaurs, like the short-necked, large-headed pliosaurs, were the apex predators of their time. Kronosaurus, colossal pliosaur from the early Cretaceous, grew to over 10 meters long, with a skull nearly 3 meters in length, a crushing engine of teeth, and bone. Then there were the mosasaurs. They arrived later, in the Cretaceous period, and their origin story is even more striking. They were not descendants of early marine reptile lines, but rather were literally giant, marine-adapted lizards. Their ancestors were likely similar to modern monitor lizards. In a relatively short geological span, they evolved into sleek, powerful swimmers, with limbs modified into paddles, tails developing a shark-like fin, and jaws becoming terrifyingly flexible to swallow prey whole. Mosasaurus hoffmanni could reach lengths of 15 meters or more, a true leviathan of the late Cretaceous seas. They were the last great marine reptiles to evolve, and they ruled the oceans right up until the very end of the age of dinosaurs. These three groups, ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, shared the same global ocean, but they inhabited different ecological spaces, hunted different prey, and moved in different ways. The Mesozoic seas were a layered world of reptilian power. Near the surface, dolphin-like ichthyosaurs chased schools of belemnites. In the midwater and along reefs, long-necked plesiosaurs stalked their prey. In the deeper, open waters and coastal zones, massive pliosaurs and later mosasaurs patrolled as supreme predators. It was a world without whales, without seals, without sharks as we know them today. The niches we now associate with marine mammals were all occupied by reptiles. What drove this incredible diversification? The Mesozoic world provided the perfect stage. The continents were joined or beginning to split, creating vast, shallow, warm epicontinental seas teeming with life. An abundance of prey, ammonites, belemnites, fish, and other marine reptiles fueled their growth. There were no mammalian competitors in the water. For these reptiles, the ocean was a land of opportunity, and evolution sculpted them into its undisputed masters. As you begin to drift, imagine the feel of that ancient water. Sunlight filters down through clear, warm seas. The shadow of a 15-meter mosasaur passes silently below. A pod of ichthyosaurs cuts through the waves with effortless grace. A long-necked plesiosaur remains motionless, a sentinel waiting, its silhouette broken only by the gentle undulation of its paddles. This was their world, a world of reptilian grace and power that lasted for epochs. But even the most perfect adaptations are subject to the turning of the geological wheel. Their reign, magnificent as it was, would not last forever. The success of the marine reptiles was not merely a matter of finding an empty niche. It was a triumph of physiological and evolutionary innovation. To conquer the sea, these former land dwellers had to solve a series of profound challenges. How to move efficiently in a dense medium, how to reproduce, how to regulate body temperature, and how to hunt in a three-dimensional, boundless world. Their solutions were as ingenious as they were diverse, turning them into perfectly calibrated machines of marine predation. Take the challenge of locomotion. The ichthyosaur solution was perhaps the most elegant. Their vertebrae became simplified and disc-like, allowing for powerful, rigid-bodied, side-to-side swimming, with the tail fluke providing the main thrust, a design mirrored perfectly by tuna and dolphins millions of years later. The plesiosaurs, however, invented a unique form of aquatic flight. Their shoulder and hip girdles were massive, anchoring huge muscles that powered their foreflippers. They likely swam using a combination of rowing and underwater flight. Their bodies held relatively stiff, generating lift and thrust with each stroke. This made them highly maneuverable, capable of sudden bursts of speed and precise movements ideal for snatching agile prey. The mosasaurs developed a more anguilliform or eel-like motion, with their long bodies and tails undulating, aided by the steering of their paddles. Each design was a masterclass in hydrodynamics, evolved independently. Then there was the matter of life itself, reproduction. Tying oneself to land to lay eggs is a severe limitation for an oceanic predator. The ichthyosaurs solved this definitively. Fossil evidence is stunningly clear. We have fossils of pregnant females, and even fossils capturing the moment of live birth, with the baby emerging tail first to prevent drowning. They had fully become viviparous, like modern whales and dolphins. Plesiosaurs and mosasaurs likely also gave birth to live young, though the fossil evidence is less direct. This adaptation meant the ocean was truly their home, cradle to grave. Maintaining warmth in the cool ocean was another hurdle. While the Mesozoic seas were generally warmer than today's, staying active as a top predator requires a high metabolism. These reptiles were almost certainly endothermic, or warm-blooded, to some degree. Evidence points to this, their fast growth rates visible in bone structure, their global distribution into cooler waters, and the need for sustained, high-energy activity. They may have used bulk gigantothermy to retain heat, much like modern leatherback turtles. A mosasaur the size of a bus would lose heat very slowly. They were not cold, sluggish lizards. They were dynamic, active, warm-bodied hunters. Their senses adapted to the aquatic realm. Ichthyosaurs, as mentioned, evolved enormous eyes for deep diving and low-light hunting. Plesiosaurs, with their long necks, may have relied on a keen sense of water pressure and vibration to detect prey. Mosasaurs had a specialized jaw joint that allowed them to swallow large prey whole, and some species had a forked tongue and a secondary set of teeth in the roof of their mouth to help manipulate and secure struggling victims. They were sensory specialists in a liquid world. This golden age of marine reptiles saw an astonishing diversity. It wasn't just about size, but about specialization. There were dolphin-sized ichthyosaurs with slender snouts for catching small fish, and others with robust jaws for crushing shellfish. Some plesiosaurs had necks so long and flexible they could have peered into a submarine's window from a dozen meters away, while pliosaurs evolved skulls capable of generating bite forces that could shatter bone and shell. Mosasaurs diversified into forms that ate ammonites, fish, other marine reptiles, and even hard-shell turtles and clams. They formed complex ecosystems. A late Cretaceous sea might have seen a mosaic of these giants. A flock of elasmosaurs grazing on small fish near the surface. A pod of ichthyosaurs diving deep for squid. And a solitary Tylosaurus, a giant mosasaur, lurking in the murky depths, an apex predator with no equal. It was a world of reptilian grace and terror that lasted for over 100 million years, a testament to the adaptability of life. Yet, even at the height of their reign, challenges emerged. The world was changing. The continents continued to drift, altering ocean currents and sea temperatures. New competitors arose. In the Cretaceous, modern-style sharks began to diversify, and teleost fish, the bony fish that dominate today, underwent their own evolutionary explosion, providing both new prey and new competition. The marine reptiles adapted, but the ecosystem was becoming more crowded, more complex. And then, there was the inevitable shadow cast by the land. The dinosaurs may not have ventured into the deep sea, but their world was inextricably linked to the oceans. Nutrients from vast river systems fed the plankton blooms that supported the entire food web. The fate of the land and the sea were woven together by climate, geology, and the fragile thread of life itself. The story of the marine reptiles is a story of evolutionary perfection in an imperfect, ever-changing world. They were not clumsy holdovers from the land, but brilliant dynamic innovations. They prove that evolution has no preferred direction, no allegiance to a habitat. If the niche exists, life will find a way to fill it, reshaping its own form with breathtaking creativity. As the sounds of this ancient ocean surround you, feel the scale of their time. They swam in seas that covered parts of what are now deserts and mountains, their bones fossilized in sediments that would be lifted into cliffs and quarries, waiting for us to discover them and piece together their lost world. Their success whispers a profound truth, that on our planet, the line between land and sea is not a barrier, but a frontier, endlessly crossed and recrossed by the relentless, inventive force of life. All reigns, no matter how magnificent, must eventually end. The world of the great marine reptiles, a dynasty that had endured for over 150 million years, faced its ultimate test not from a new competitor or a gradual shift in climate, but from a single, cataclysmic event that would rewrite the history of life on Earth. Their story concludes not with a whimper, but within the fiery, earth-shattering drama of the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction. For millions of years leading up to that fateful moment, the marine reptiles continued to thrive, diversifying into ever more specialized forms. The mosasaurs, in particular, had become the undisputed top predators of the late Cretaceous seas. Yet, the stability of their world was an illusion. The continents were breaking apart, Volcanism was increasing, and ecosystems were under stress. Then, 66 million years ago, a celestial object, an asteroid perhaps 10 kilometers wide, slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The immediate effects were apocalyptic. A fireball incinerated everything within hundreds of miles. Mega tsunamis, hundreds of meters high, scoured coastlines across the Gulf of Mexico and beyond. But for the marine reptiles, the true killers were the indirect, global consequences that unfolded in the days, months, and years that followed. The impact vaporized rock and launched billions of tons of debris into the atmosphere. Soot from global wildfires joined this pall. The sky darkened for months, perhaps years, plunging the planet into a prolonged impact winter. Photosynthesis ground to a halt. On land, plants died. In the oceans, the phytoplankton, the microscopic algae that formed the base of the marine food web, collapsed. This was the fatal blow for the great marine reptiles. They were apex predators, sitting at the top of long, complex food chains. When the phytoplankton died, the zooplankton that ate them starved. Then the small fish that ate the zooplankton perished. The chain of starvation climbed relentlessly upward, to the larger fish, to the ammonites and belemnites, and finally, to the great reptiles themselves. An ichthyosaur or a mosasaur, no matter how powerful, could not survive in a dead sea. Their enormous energy requirements, once their greatest strength, became their fatal liability. They needed to eat, and there was nothing left to eat. The plesiosaurs, with their varied diets, and the ichthyosaurs, which had already been in decline, vanished. The mighty mosasaurs, the last and perhaps most formidable of the marine reptile dynasties, disappeared forever. Their reign ended not with a battle, but with a silent, global famine in sunless seas that in the aftermath, the oceans were left desolate. It took thousands of years for the skies to clear and photosynthesis to restart. When life finally began to recover, the world was different. The great marine reptiles were gone. The niches they had dominated for so long, the open water pursuit predator, the ambush hunter, the shallow water apex carnivore, now stood empty. And nature abhors a vacuum. Into this emptiness stepped new rulers. From the shadows of the old world emerged the ancestors of modern sharks, which had survived the extinction due to their slower metabolisms, broader diets, or ability to enter a torpid state. And from the land came a new group of mammals, small, furry survivors of the catastrophe that had wiped out the dinosaurs. Over the next tens of millions of years, some of these mammals would venture back into the sea, just as the reptiles had done long before. They would evolve into whales, dolphins, seals, and sea lions, eventually filling the ecological roles once held by ichthyosaurs and pliosaurs. The circle was complete, but the players had changed. The legacy of the marine reptiles is not written in living descendants, but in stone and in lesson. They show us the breathtaking power of evolution to adapt, to specialize, and to conquer. They prove that vertebrates can utterly transform their body plan to master a new element. But their end carries an equally powerful warning that even the most perfectly adapted, dominant forms of life are not immune to catastrophe. Their fate is a humbling reminder of the fragility of even the grandest ecosystems in the face of global disruption. As you listen now, let the images of these magnificent creatures, the sleek ichthyosaur, the serpentine plesiosaur, the formidable mosasaur, swim through the darkness of your mind one final time. They were real. They ruled a world that is lost to us, a world of warm, teeming seas under a sun that shone on a different arrangement of continents. Their bones are now mountains, their homes are now deserts. But for an unimaginable stretch of time, they were the kings of all they surveyed. Their story is a chapter in the greater story of life on Earth, a story of resilience, innovation, and inevitable change. We are part of that same story. The same forces that shaped them shape us. The same vulnerabilities that felled them threaten the ecosystems we depend on today. So, as this chapter on the lords of the Mesozoic seas closes, take with you a sense of awe for their grandeur and a sober respect for the forces that govern life's tapestry. The ocean's memory is long, and its depths have housed many queens and kings. The marine reptiles were among its greatest, and their silent, fossilized testimony continues to speak to us across the abyss of time. Now, let the sounds of that ancient ocean fade. The last swish of a mosasaur's tail, the final bubble from a plesiosaur's dive, the distant call of a lost world, all dissolve into the deep, timeless murmur of the sea itself, which continues, as it always has, indifferent to the dynasties that rise and fall within its embrace. Our journey through the lost worlds of prehistory now lifts us from the depths of the ancient seas and carries us into the open air. For the first time in Earth's history, the skies, a realm of empty air and distant clouds, were about to be conquered. But the first masters of flight were not birds, and they were not insects. They were reptiles. This is the story of the pterosaurs, the first vertebrates ever to achieve powered flight. Theirs is a tale of anatomical audacity, of evolutionary ingenuity that turned a forearm into a wing, and of creatures that grew to sizes that still defy belief. They were not dinosaurs. They were their cousins, a separate, magnificent lineage that looked at the sky and said, "That is ours." Our story begins in the late Triassic, over 220 million years ago. The ancestors of pterosaurs were small, likely tree-dwelling reptiles called legirpedids. They were agile climbers, perhaps leaping between branches. From this lineage, a revolutionary adaptation emerged, an extraordinary elongation of the fourth finger. This single bone, longer than the entire arm and body combined, became the primary support for a wing membrane or patagium. This membrane stretched from the tip of this ultra-long finger down the side of the body to the ankle. It was a structure of skin, muscle, and reinforcing fibers called actinofibrils, a living, flexible airfoil. The first pterosaurs, like Eudomorphodon, were small, with wingspans of about a meter, and they still had long tails and teeth full of varied shapes, suggesting a diet of insects and small prey. Flight demands lightness. Pterosaur evolution became a masterclass in weight reduction. Their bones were hollow and paper-thin, yet reinforced with internal struts, like the structural braces in a modern airplane wing. This pneumatic skeleton was incredibly strong for its weight. Their breastbone developed a large keel to anchor powerful flight muscles. Their brains, revealed by fossilized brain casts, show enlarged regions associated with vision, coordination, and balance, the neural hardware for a life in 3 dimensions. They were not clumsy gliders. They were sophisticated, active flyers capable of flapping flight, soaring, and intricate maneuverability. As the Jurassic period dawned, pterosaurs diversified. 2 major lineages emerged. The early, long-tailed rhamphorhynchoids persisted, some developing specialized jaws for catching fish. But it was the pterodactyloids, the short-tailed pterosaurs, that would truly come to dominate the skies. With their shorter tails, fused vertebrae for rigidity, and often toothless beaks, they were more streamlined and efficient. They were the jet aircraft to the earlier generations' biplanes, and then they began to grow. Throughout the Cretaceous period, pterosaurs pushed the limits of how large a flying animal could be. Pteranodon, with its iconic backward-pointing crest, soared over the western interior seaway of North America on wings stretching 7 meters or more. It was a master of dynamic soaring, using ocean winds to travel vast distances with minimal effort, dipping its slender beak into the water to snatch fish. But even Pteranodon was not the pinnacle of size. That title belongs to the Azhdarchids. These were the giraffes of the sky. They had incredibly long, stiff necks and legs like a stalker's. And then there was Quetzalcoatlus northropi, discovered in Texas. This pterosaur had a wingspan estimated at 10 to 11 meters, as wide as a small airplane. Standing, it could have looked a modern giraffe in the eye. Its anatomy suggests it was a terrestrial stalker, walking on all fours in inland environments, using its enormous height and sharp beak to pluck small dinosaurs, lizards, and carrion from the ground. It likely launched itself into the air with powerful leaps from all 4 limbs, a sight that must have been one of the most awe-inspiring in all of nature. The world of the pterosaurs was a world of leathery wings blotting out the sun, of strange crests used for display and steering, and of a mastery of the air that would not be matched until birds, their distant cousins, eventually took over the skies millions of years later. They filled every aerial niche: insect hawkers, fish snatchers, filter feeders, and even terrestrial predators. They were a complete evolutionary experiment in vertebrate flight, separate from birds and bats, and in many ways, uniquely bizarre and brilliant. As you begin to drift, Imagine the feeling of that ancient air beneath such a wing. Feel the warmth of the sun on the vast membrane, the subtle adjustments of the clawed fingers at the wing's leading edge, the rush of the landscape far below. Picture a flock of pteranodon riding a thermal over a sparkling inland sea, or the colossal, silent shadow of a Quetzalcoatlus gliding over a fern prairie. The sky was no longer empty. It was a highway, a hunting ground, a home. But the very adaptations that made them kings of the air also made them exquisitely tuned to a specific world. Their delicate, hollow bones were marvels of engineering, but fragile. Their success was tied to the warm, oxygen-rich Mesozoic atmosphere and the abundant life in its seas and forests. And like the marine reptiles and the dinosaurs themselves, their world was destined for a shuddering, violent change. Their flight, so magnificent, would ultimately have no escape from a disaster that enveloped the entire planet. The success of the pterosaurs was not just a matter of growing large and taking to the air. It was a story of profound specialization, where every aspect of their anatomy, physiology, and behavior was refined for a life aloft. To understand them is to unravel a series of elegant solutions to the immense challenges of vertebrate flight, solutions that were, in many cases, utterly unique and have never been replicated. Consider the wing itself. Unlike the feathered wings of birds or the fibrous wings of bats, the pterosaur wing was a single, continuous membrane of skin. But it was far from simple. It was a living, dynamic organ. The membrane was reinforced with a network of stiff, hair-like fibers called actinofibrils, which acted like the ribs of an umbrella, maintaining an optimal airfoil shape and preventing flutter. At the leading edge of the wing, the elongated fourth finger provided the primary spar, a smaller clawed pteroid bone, a wrist bone unique to pterosaurs, projected forward, likely helping to control the shape of the wing's front edge and adjust camber for fine control. Launching such a large structure into the air presented another puzzle. Birds use their powerful hind limbs to leap. Bats crawl to a height and drop. Pterosaurs, especially the giants, develop a unique quad launch. Fossil trackways and biomechanical studies suggest they used all four limbs. They would crouch, then powerfully extend both their forelimbs, wings, and hind limbs simultaneously, vaulting themselves into the air in a single explosive motion. Once airborne, their flight muscles, anchored to that large breastbone, could take over. It was a launch sequence unlike anything seen before or since. Their lifestyles were as varied as their forms. While many, like Pteranodon, were aerial fishermen, others carved out distinct niches. The bizarre pterodostro from South America had 1,000 long, bristle-like teeth in its lower jaw, forming a filter-feeding apparatus to strain tiny crustaceans from the water, much like a flamingo. The small Anurognithus had wide, frog-like mouths and were likely aerial insectivores, snatching moths and flies in dusk skies. Some crests, like the spectacular, sail-like structure of Tupandactylus were almost certainly for display, perhaps glowing with color to attract mates or signal to rivals. But perhaps the most fascinating questions surround their biology on the ground. How did a creature with a 10-meter wingspan walk? Fossil trackways, particularly of asdarchids like Quetzalcoatlus, provide the answer. They were competent, even efficient, quadrupeds. When grounded, they folded their wings dramatically, walking on their knuckles with the 3 small front fingers of the hand, while their hind feet bore their weight. This gave them a strange, high-stepping gait. They were not clumsy or helpless on the ground. They were adaptable, capable of stalking through fern prairies or wading in shallow lakes. Their metabolism is another area of intrigue. Active, sustained flight requires a high metabolic rate. Evidence from bone histology suggests they were fast growers, a trait associated with warm-bloodedness. They likely had a coat of hair-like filaments called pycnofibers, which cover their bodies, providing insulation. This points to an endothermic physiology. They were warm-blooded reptiles, maintaining a high internal temperature to fuel their demanding lifestyle. The sky is a cold place, and they built a biological furnace to thrive there. This combination of traits paints a picture of pterosaurs not as reptilian kites, but as dynamic, active, and intelligent animals. Their brains, while different from those of birds, show well-developed optic lobes and cerebellum, indicating excellent eyesight and motor coordination, essential for navigating a 3-dimensional world at speed. They were almost certainly social to some degree. Fossils are often found in groups, and elaborate crests suggest complex social behaviors. For millions of years, this experiment in flight was wildly successful. They shared the skies with early birds, which first appeared in the Jurassic. For a long time, the 2 groups coexisted, with birds generally occupying smaller body-size niches in forests and undergrowth, while pterosaurs dominated the open skies and larger aerial predatory roles. It was not an immediate takeover by birds. Pterosaurs were holding their own in a world they had pioneered. Yet by the late Cretaceous, a shift was underway. The once diverse families of pterosaurs had dwindled. Only the giant asdarchids and a few other groups like the pteranodontids remained. Their ecological space seemed to be narrowing. The reasons are still debated. Increasing competition from birds, changing climates, or perhaps shifts in their food sources. They were still magnificent, still rulers of the aerial realm in terms of sheer size, but their dynasty was showing signs of strain. They had survived continental breakups, sea level changes, and competition. But they, like all the magnificent creatures of the Mesozoic, were living in a world of immense stability that was about to be shattered. Their fate, like that of their terrestrial dinosaur cousins and marine reptile contemporaries, was tied to the very planet they soared above. The adaptability that had let them conquer the sky would meet a challenge for which no evolution could prepare them. As the wind continues to whisper, Imagine the last generation of these sky giants. A Quetzalcoatl stalks the Cretaceous floodplain, its shadow flowing over the ferns. A flock of pteranodon rides the coastal thermals, their cries echoing over the water. They are the heirs to 150 million years of aerial evolution. They do not know they are the last. Their world is complete, vibrant, and in geological terms, moments from its end. The end of the pterosaurs is inextricably linked to the end of an era. For over 160 million years, they had been the undisputed sovereigns of the air, evolving from small, tailed insectivores into the largest flying animals ever to exist. Their reign saw the breakup of Pangaea, the rise of flowering plants, and the diversification of dinosaurs below. Yet their final chapter was written not by a superior competitor gradually overtaking them, but by a single, catastrophic day that reset the course of life on Earth. In the final millennia of the Cretaceous, pterosaur diversity had already diminished. The skies were still home to giants like Quetzalcoatlus and specialized fishers like pteranodon, but many of the smaller, more varied forms were gone. Birds, which had been evolving in the shadows since the Jurassic, were diversifying into new forms. Some paleontologists suggest birds may have been outcompeting smaller pterosaurs for insect prey or nesting sites, pushing pterosaurs toward larger, more specialized niches where their size was an advantage. But they were still here. They were still masters of their domain. Then came the asteroid, the cataclysm that ended the Cretaceous period 66 million years ago. Did not discriminate between land, sea, or air. The immediate effects, firestorms, tsunamis, global earthquakes, were devastating, but for flying animals, the aftermath was a slower, more insidious extinction. The impact threw billions of tons of vaporized rock and soot into the upper atmosphere, blotting out the sun for months, perhaps years. Global temperatures plummeted. Photosynthesis crashed. For pterosaurs, this meant a cascade of ruin. The first link to break was the food web. Insect populations, dependent on plants, collapsed. Small vertebrates died. In the oceans, plankton perished, causing fish stocks to crash. Large, soaring pterosaurs like pteranodon, which relied on rich coastal seas teeming with fish, found their hunting grounds turned into barren, dark waters. The giant terrestrial asdarchids, which stalked small animals on land, found a world where their prey had vanished, and the lush vegetation that harbored them was dead or dying. Their physiology, so perfectly adapted for an active life in a stable, warm world, became a liability. Large, warm-blooded animals with high metabolic rates need to eat, frequently and a lot. In a world of sudden famine, size was a death sentence. A Quetzalcoatlus needed a vast amount of food daily. When that food disappeared, its magnificent wings could not carry it to a place where conditions were better, because there were none. The disaster was global. Furthermore, their unique reproductive strategy may have failed them. While evidence is scant, it's believed many pterosaurs, like most reptiles, laid eggs, but raising a vulnerable, slow-growing chick to adulthood in a shattered, sunless world would have been nearly impossible. Birds, with their smaller size, more rapid growth rates, diverse diets, and in some cases, hardier seeds or detritus to eat, had a slight edge, an edge that allowed a few lineages to squeak through the bottleneck of extinction. And so the pterosaurs vanished, not with a gradual decline, but with a geological suddenness, the last of their kind, the last great leathery wings that had once cast moving shadows on dinosaur herds, did not see the dawn of the Paleogene. The skies, which for so long had rustled with their flight, fell silent. In the emptiness they left behind, the birds inherited the air. With the giant pterosaurs gone, birds radiated explosively in the Cenozoic era, evolving into the myriad forms we know today. Eagles, hummingbirds, penguins, and ostriches. They filled every aerial niche, but they never again reached the sheer absolute size of the largest pterosaurs. The Asdarchids hold the record for vertebrate flight, a record that stands unchallenged after 66 million years. The legacy of the pterosaurs is not in living descendants, but in the boldness of their evolutionary statement. They were a proof of concept. Vertebrates could fly, and could do so on a scale that still baffles engineers. They teach us that evolution can arrive at the same destination, mastery of the air, via wildly different paths. Feathers versus membrane, hollow bones with air sacs versus hollow bones with struts, a feathered tail versus rudder-like crest. Their story is also one of fragility. For all their magnificence, they were exquisitely tuned instruments playing a specific symphony, the symphony of the Mesozoic world. When the music stopped, they could not play another tune. Their extinction reminds us that dominance is never permanent, that even the most successful designs are contingent on a stable world. As you listen now, let the final image of these creatures be not one of extinction, but of flight. Picture them in their prime, a pteranodon banking effortlessly over a sparkling sea, the morning sun glowing through its wings, a flock of smaller pterosaurs wheeling through a canyon, their cries echoing off stone, the colossal, silent glide of a Quetzalcoatlus, a living piece of the sky itself, moving with a grace that belied its enormous size. They are gone, but they were here. For an unimaginably long span of time, they were the dragons of the real world. Their fossils are their testimony, and their story is a soaring, daring chapter in the epic of life on Earth, a chapter that says, "Look what is possible." Now, let the sounds of their world gently fade. The wind that once lifted them softens. The last, distant cry echoes and is lost. The sky sound returns to what it was before them and after them. The pure, empty, eternal sigh of the atmosphere, a blank canvas waiting for the next artist. Our journey now brings us to the most iconic inhabitants of prehistory, the giants of the land. For over 180 million years, the continents were dominated by creatures of staggering scale the dinosaurs. And long after they were gone, another wave of giants, the megafauna of the Ice Age, walked the earth. This is a story not just of size, but of the evolutionary and ecological forces that pushed life to become colossal, of the benefits and burdens of gigantism, and of the fragile existence of Earth's greatest land animals. Our story begins in the Triassic, in the wake of the previous mass extinction. The empty niches left behind were a blank slate. Among the early archosaurs, a group of reptiles that would give rise to crocodiles, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs, a new strategy emerged: upright posture. The first dinosaurs, like the small bipedal Eoraptor, were not giants. They were agile, likely warm-blooded to some degree, and they possessed a more efficient columnar leg structure directly under their bodies, unlike the sprawled posture of lizards. This design provided better support, more efficient locomotion, and was the foundational blueprint for bigness. As the Jurassic period dawned, the stage was set for gigantism. The breakup of Pangaea created vast inland plains and humid, lush environments teeming with fern prairies and coniferous forests. The climate was generally warm and stable, with high levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide fueling plant growth. Food was abundant. In this world, the sauropods, the long-necked, long-tailed dinosaurs, embarked on one of evolution's most spectacular experiments. They became the largest land animals of all time. Argentinosaurus, a titanosaur from the late Cretaceous of what is now Argentina, may have reached lengths of 35 meters and weights of 70 to 100 tons. To understand such size is to grapple with a biological marvel. Their size was a defense in itself. Few predators could tackle a healthy adult, but it required extraordinary adaptations. Their necks and tails were counterbalanced, acting as living seesaws. Their vertebrae were honeycombed with air sacs, making their skeletons incredibly light yet strong. They likely had a bird-like respiratory system with air sacs throughout their bodies, ensuring oxygen reached every cell. They swallowed stones, gastroliths, to help grind tough vegetation in their stomachs, as they barely chewed. They were walking ecosystems, their sheer bulk creating microclimates and pathways through forests. But the sauropods were not the only giants. At the other end of the spectrum were the theropods, the carnivorous dinosaurs, and among them, the apex of predatory design, Tyrannosaurus rex. Living in the late Cretaceous of North America, T. rex was not the largest theropod, but it was the most powerfully built. At 12 meters long and weighing up to 9 tons, it was a pure exercise in biomechanical power. Its skull, over 1.5 meters long, was a bone-crushing machine, with teeth the size of bananas that could generate one of the highest bite forces of any land animal. Its tiny arms, long a subject of ridicule, were likely used for grappling prey or pushing itself up from the ground. Its legs were pillars, built for bearing immense weight and delivering surprising bursts of speed. T. rex was not a swift pursuit hunter. It was an ambush predator and a scavenger, a force of nature that embodied the raw power available at the top of the dinosaur food web. These giants did not live in a vacuum. They were part of complex ecosystems. Herds of hadrosaurs, duck-billed dinosaurs, migrated across continents, their chewing batteries of hundreds of teeth capable of processing the toughest plants. Armored ankylosaurs and horned ceratopsians developed formidable defenses against predators like T-Rex. The world thrived on a scale we can barely imagine. A world of thunderous footsteps, low-frequency calls that rumbled for miles, and a constant, slow-motion dance of eating and being eaten. Yet the age of dinosaurs, for all its magnificence, came to an abrupt end. The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event wiped out all non-avian dinosaurs, the great marine reptiles, and the pterosaurs. The age of reptilian giants was over, but the story of gigantism on land was not. After the extinction, mammals, which had survived as small, shrew-like creatures, began their own evolutionary radiation. For tens of millions of years, they grew. And in the geologically recent past, during the Pleistocene epoch, the Ice Age, a new wave of megafauna emerged. This was the age of mammalian giants, the woolly mammoth, the mastodon, the giant ground sloth megatherium, as large as an elephant, the saber-toothed cat Smilodon, the short-faced bear, taller than a polar bear when standing, and the diprotodon, a wombat the size of a rhinoceros. These creatures were not relics. They were modern adaptations to a world of glacial advances and retreats, of vast grasslands and steppes. The woolly mammoth, cloaked in shaggy hair and wielding enormous curved tusks, was perfectly adapted to the cold mammoth steppe that stretched from Europe across Beringia into North America. They were the keystones of their ecosystems, shaping the vegetation and landscape just as elephants do today. As you begin to drift, let the scale of these beings settle upon you. Feel the tremor in the ground as a herd of titanosaurs passes. Sense the focused, formidable presence of a T-Rex on the hunt. Then shift epochs. Feel the cold wind blowing across the steppe, carrying the musky scent and low trumpet of a woolly mammoth herd. These were the true giants of our planet, products of millions of years of evolution, pushing the boundaries of what is possible for a land-dwelling body. But size, as we will see, is a double-edged sword. It provides defense and access to resources, but it also demands immense amounts of food, makes populations more vulnerable to environmental change, and ultimately may become a fatal burden when the world shifts too quickly. Gigantism is not a random accident of evolution. It is a strategic response to specific environmental pressures and opportunities. For both dinosaurs and Ice Age megafauna, immense size conferred critical advantages, but it also demanded a suite of profound biological innovations and came with severe constraints. Understanding these giants means delving into the intricate engineering of their bodies and the delicate balance of their ecosystems. For sauropods, size was primarily a defense. In a world with massive theropod predators, becoming too large to be easily killed was an effective survival strategy. But achieving such size required overcoming fundamental challenges of physics and biology. The most pressing issue was support. Their columnar legs, like the pillars of a cathedral, were positioned directly beneath their bodies, optimized for bearing immense weight with minimal muscular effort. Their bones, while massive, were not solid. They possessed a complex system of air sacs that extended from their lungs into their vertebrae and other bones, making their skeletons remarkably lightweight, yet strong, a biological version of the steel trusses in a modern bridge. Then came the challenge of nourishment. A 70-ton Argentinosaurus needed to consume hundreds of kilograms of vegetation every day. Their long necks acted as enormous, elevated feeding booms, allowing them to graze over a vast area without moving their colossal bodies. They had tiny heads relative to their bodies and simple, peg-like teeth designed for stripping leaves, not chewing. Digestion happened internally in a massive fermentation vat of a stomach, aided by swallowed gastroliths. Their metabolism was likely a unique strategy. They may have been inertial homeotherms, the sheer bulk allowing them to maintain a stable internal temperature with a relatively low metabolic rate per cell, a concept called gigantothermy. For the predatory giants like T. rex, size served a different purpose, dominance. Their mass translated into power. The physics of their bite are staggering. Studies of their skull strength and muscle attachments suggest a bite force of up to 57,000 newtons, enough to crush bone and rip through the armor of ceratopsians and ankylosaurs. This made them not just hunters, but the ultimate recyclers, capable of accessing the nutrient-rich marrow and bone that other scavengers could not. Their vision was likely keen, their sense of smell highly developed, indicated by large olfactory bulbs in their brain casts, making them formidable detectors of carrion or prey over long distances. They were ecosystems' ultimate regulators. Switch now to the Ice Age megafauna. For mammals, gigantism often served as a defense against predators and a way to survive in harsh climates. Large body size provides a favorable surface area to volume ratio, helping to conserve heat in cold environments. This is known as Bergmann's rule. The woolly mammoth's huge body, insulated by a thick layer of fat and a dense, shaggy coat, was a perfect adaptation to the frigid mammoth steppe. Their enormous, curved tusks were multi-purpose tools for stripping bark, digging for roots under the snow, fighting rivals, and possibly clearing snow to reach grass. But size also creates vulnerability. Large animals have slower reproductive rates. Elephants, and likely mammoths, have long gestation periods, nearly 2 years, and raise few offspring over a lifetime. They require vast, continuous territories to find enough food. Their populations are naturally denser and slower to recover from decline. This makes them exquisitely sensitive to environmental change and change came. For the dinosaurs, it was sudden and catastrophic. The asteroid impact triggered a rapid, global winter that collapsed the food web. The giant herbivores, needing vast amounts of fresh plant matter daily, starved. The giant carnivores, dependent on those herbivores, followed. Their specialized diets, slow population turnover, and high energy demands became death sentences in a world where the rules changed overnight. For the Ice Age megafauna, the end was more nuanced and is a subject of intense debate, the Quaternary extinction event. As the last ice age waned around 11,700 years ago, two major forces converged: climate change and the spread of modern humans. The warming climate dramatically altered habitats. The vast, cold, dry mammoth steppe gave way to wetter tundra, boreal forest, and peatland, ecosystems less favorable to giant grazers. At the same time, Homo sapiens, armed with advanced hunting techniques, cooperation, and possibly fire-driven landscape management, expanded across the globe. The combination was likely fatal. The changing climate stressed megafauna populations, fragmenting their habitats and reducing their food sources. Then, human hunting provided additional, unsustainable pressure. The overkill hypothesis suggests that humans, encountering naive animals that had no fear of this new, bipedal predator, hunted them to extinction. Other factors like disease introduced by humans or their dogs may have played a role. Whatever the precise mix, the result was clear. Across the Americas, Australia, and Eurasia, most land animals over a certain size disappeared within a few thousand years of human arrival. The parallels and differences between these two great ages of giants are sobering. Both were enabled by stable, productive environments. Both ended in part because of rapid environmental change. But while the dinosaurs fell to an extraterrestrial accident, the fate of the Ice Age megafauna is intertwined with our own species' rise. Their story is closer to us, reminder of the profound impact humanity has had, even with Stone Age technology, on the planet's biological legacy. The silence that followed these extinctions is profound. The thunderous footsteps ceased. The low-frequency rumbles of communication faded. The landscapes were left without their largest architects. The world became, in many ways, a quieter, smaller place. The legacy of Earth's terrestrial giants is written not in genes, but in stone, in soil, and in the very shape of our world. Their passing left voids that echoed through ecosystems for millennia, reshaping the trajectory of life. Yet their story is more than a tale of extinction. It is a meditation on scale, time, and the indelible mark that the largest living things leave on the planet they inhabit, and on the consciousness of the species that came after. Consider the ecological impact of these giants. Sauropods were not just consumers. They were ecosystem engineers. Their feeding likely created mosaic landscapes, clearing patches of forest and promoting new growth. much like elephants do today. Their sheer movement compacted soil and created trails that channeled water flow. Their massive nutrient intake and excretion would have redistributed minerals across vast areas, fertilizing the land. The disappearance of such creatures at the end of the Cretaceous would have caused a fundamental shift in how plant communities grew and structured themselves. Similarly, the Ice Age megafauna were keystone species. Woolly mammoths are believed to have maintained the mammoth steppe, a rich, grassy ecosystem, by knocking down trees, dispersing seeds, and fertilizing the soil. Their removal, combined with climate change, is thought to have contributed to the steppe's transformation into less productive tundra and boreal forest, a shift that likely amplified global warming by releasing stored carbon. The loss of giant ground sloths, glyptodonts, and other large herbivores in the Americas altered fire regimes, as unchecked vegetation growth provided more fuel for wildfires. The world we inherited is a world shaped by their absence. For us, Homo sapiens, these giants live on in our collective imagination. Dinosaurs are the ultimate symbols of a lost, powerful world, fueling both scientific inquiry and mythical wonder. The mammoth, frozen in permafrost with flesh and hair intact, feels hauntingly recent, a tangible ghost from the ice. Our cave paintings in Lascaux, Chauvet, and elsewhere are not just art. They are records of awe, documents of a time when humans shared the landscape with creatures of sublime scale and power. We hunted them, we revered them, and we ultimately witnessed or caused their end. This leads to a profound and unsettling reflection. The extinction of the dinosaurs was a cosmic accident. The extinction of the Pleistocene megafauna coincides strikingly with human expansion. While debate continues, the evidence suggests we played a significant, perhaps decisive, role. This places a unique responsibility on our species. We are the first to comprehend deep time, to reconstruct these lost worlds, and to understand our own potential impact as a global force. The story of the giants is, in part, a story about us, about our power, our appetite, and our growing awareness of the fragility of life's grandest forms. But the story does not end with loss. It also speaks to resilience and continuity. From the dinosaurs, one lineage survived, the birds. Every songbird, every eagle, every hummingbird is a living, feathered dinosaur, a testament to the enduring vitality of that lineage. And while the mammoth is gone, its closest relative, the Asian elephant, still walks the earth, a living reminder of the age of giants. Conservation efforts today are, in a sense, an attempt to prevent the final loss of the last megafauna, elephants, rhinos, whales, who are now under threat from a new, hyper-accelerated force of change, industrialized humanity. As you listen now, in the quiet of your own space, consider the scale of time that separates you from these creatures. The last T-Rex died 66 million years ago. The last woolly mammoth on Wrangel Island died just 4,000 years ago, as the great pyramids were being built in Egypt. One is in the unfathomable deep past. The other was our neighbor in the blink of geological time. Their stories offer a dual lesson. First, a lesson in humility. Even the most dominant, awe-inspiring species are not permanent. Their worlds can end with a rock from space, or the relentless pressure of a new, clever predator. Second, a lesson in connection. We are part of the same tapestry of life. The oxygen we breathe was cycled through plants that grew in soils shaped by sauropods. The landscapes we admire were grazed by mammoths. We stand on ground that trembled under their feet. So, let the final images of these giants be not of their ends, but of their lives in full grandeur. Picture a Cretaceous floodplain at dawn, steaming under a huge sun, alive with the sounds of giants, the lowing of hadrosaurs, the bellow of a T-Rex, the earth-shaking tread of a titanosaur herd. Then shift to a crisp Pleistocene morning on the steppe, the air sharp with cold, the silence broken by the crack of ice, and the deep rumble of mammoths, their breath forming clouds in the icy air, their dark forms moving like mountains against the snow. They are gone, but in remembering them, in piecing together their lives from fossils and frozen remains, we do more than satisfy curiosity. We honor the incredible diversity and grandeur of life on Earth. We acknowledge our own place in this long, unfinished story. And we are reminded that with our unique power of understanding comes responsibility to protect the giants that still walk among us, lest we become the authors of the next great emptying. Now, let the sounds of these ancient worlds gently recede. The footfalls grow distant, the calls fade into echoes, the rustling of ancient forests and icy grasses softens to a whisper. What remains is the quiet hum of the present, a world that is different, quieter, but still beautiful, still alive with the legacy of all that came before. Welcome to the final chapter of Scientific Serenity's journey through prehistoric worlds. We have met the innovators, the rulers of sea and sky, the giants of the land. Now we confront the force that waits for all life, no matter how successful, extinction, but not the quiet fading of a single species. This is the story of mass extinction, when the rules of the game change catastrophically, and Earth must write its next chapter on a nearly blank page. This is a tale of two great dyings, the one that ended the age of dinosaurs, and the one that claimed the Ice Age megafauna. Through them, we learn the fragile balance of life's grandeur and the sobering power of change. Our story's first act opens 66 million years ago, at the end of the Cretaceous period. The world is warm, the seas are full of ammonites and mosasaurs, the skies belong to pterosaurs, and the land is dominated by dinosaurs. It is a thriving, complex, 180-million-year-old dynasty. Then, in an instant, geology and astronomy converge. A carbonaceous chondrite asteroid, roughly 10 kilometers in diameter, a mountain traveling at cosmic speed, slammed into the shallow seas of what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The energy released was on the order of billions of Hiroshima bombs. It created a crater over 150 kilometers wide and 20 kilometers deep. The immediate effects were local Armageddon, vaporization, firestorms, and mega tsunamis that swept across the Gulf of Mexico. But for life globally, the true killers were the aftereffects. The impact ejected trillions of tons of vaporized rock, dust, and soot from global wildfires high into the atmosphere. This particulate cloud enveloped the planet, blocking sunlight for months, possibly years. Photosynthesis stopped. On land, plants withered. In the oceans, phytoplankton, the base of the marine food web, collapsed. The planet plunged into an impact winter, with global temperatures dropping by as much as 25 degrees Celsius. The food chain, from the bottom up, disintegrated. Large herbivores, dependent on vast quantities of fresh vegetation, starved first. The great sauropods, hadrosaurs, and ceratopsians fell. Their predators, like Tyrannosaurus rex, followed swiftly. In the oceans, the collapse of plankton doomed the ammonites, the great marine reptiles, and giant fish. The skies, darkened and lifeless, became a tomb for pterosaurs. This was not a selective extinction. It was an ecological reset. Animals with specialized diets, high energy needs, slow reproduction, or large body sizes were disproportionately wiped out. The survivors were those that could endure darkness, cold, and famine. Small omnivores, scavengers, creatures with burrowing habits, and organisms with dormant life stages. But why did some lineages survive while others vanished entirely? This is where the deep resilience of life reveals itself. The surviving mammals were small, nocturnal, insectivorous or seed-eating, and possibly burrowing. Their flexibility was their armor. Birds, the feathered descendants of small theropod dinosaurs, survived likely due to their small size. Diverse diets, seeds can persist in darkness, and possibly their ability to fly to scattered resources. Crocodilians and turtles, with their slow metabolisms and ability to go long periods without food, weathered the storm. Life hung on by a thread, but it held. The Cretaceous-Paleogene KPG extinction was the fifth great mass extinction in Earth's history. It wiped out an estimated 76% of all species, including every non-avian dinosaur. It marked the most definitive end of an era, closing the Mesozoic and opening the Cenozoic, the age of mammals. But it also created opportunity. With the dominant reptiles gone, mammals, birds, and other survivors radiated into the empty niches, setting the stage for the world we know. This cataclysm was impersonal, a cosmic accident. The planet's reigning superstars were in the wrong place at the wrong time in galactic history. Their end was a tragedy of scale and circumstance, not failure. They were perfectly adapted to a world that, in a single day, ceased to exist. As you absorb the scale of this event, let the sounds of that ancient world, The calls, the rustles, the footfalls grow distant, muffled under the thick, global dust cloud. A profound, eerie quiet descends, broken only by the howl of a cold, sunless wind. It is the sound of a planet holding its breath. But Earth's story of loss is not finished. A second, more recent, and more intimate extinction awaited. The second great dying we must confront is closer to us in time, woven into the very dawn of human history. It is the Quaternary extinction event, the loss of the Ice Age megafauna that unfolded between 50,000 and 10,000 years ago, peaking as the last glaciers retreated. Its cause is not a rock from space, but a tangled web of climate change and the rise of a new, global predator, Homo sapiens. This story is more complex, more debated, and in many ways, more haunting. As the Pleistocene epoch waned, the planet was emerging from a series of glacial cycles. Vast ice sheets were melting, sea levels were rising, and continents were being reconfigured. For the megafauna, the woolly mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, and diprotodons, this was a time of profound habitat change. The great mammoth steppes, cold, dry, and grassy, were shrinking, giving way to wetter tundra, bog, and forest. These were specialists, exquisitely adapted to a specific world that was transforming faster than they could evolve. Enter humans, Homo sapiens, armed with advanced cognitive abilities, cooperative hunting strategies, and sophisticated tools, began to spread out of Africa. They reached Australia around 65,000 years ago, Europe and Asia around 45,000 years ago, and the Americas via Beringia around 16,000 years ago. The pattern that emerged is striking. Shortly after human arrival on a continent, a wave of megafaunal extinctions followed. In Australia, giant wombats, marsupial lions, and massive kangaroos vanished. In the Americas, the loss was staggering. Mammoths, mastodons, ground sloths, glyptodonts, saber-tooths, and the American lion all disappeared within a few millennia of human arrival. In Europe and Asia, the extinction was more drawn out, but followed a similar trend, with the last woolly mammoths clinging to remote Arctic islands until about 4,000 years ago. Was this coincidence or causation? The overkill hypothesis argues that humans were the primary driver. These animals had evolved for millions of years without a highly intelligent, cooperative, technological bipedal predator. They were ecologically naive. Humans could hunt even the largest animals using traps, coordinated drives, and specialized weapons like the Clovis point. The slow reproductive rates of megafauna, long gestation, single offspring, extended parental care, meant they could not withstand even moderate hunting pressure. It was, in ecological terms, an unsustainable harvest. But the story is not so simple. Climate change was also a powerful force. The shift from glacial to interglacial conditions reshaped entire ecosystems. Some scientists propose the climate change hypothesis as the main driver, arguing that habitat fragmentation and new plant communities doomed the specialists. The most compelling view is the synergistic hypothesis. Climate change stressed and fragmented megafauna populations, making them more vulnerable. Then, human hunting provided the final, decisive push. The combination of a changing environment and a new, relentless predator was a 1-2 punch from which they could not recover. There's a profound difference between this extinction and the KPG event. The asteroid was a random, external shock. The quaternary extinction was driven by forces within the Earth system, its climate, and, arguably, one of its own species. For the first time, a biological agent had the power to reshape global biodiversity on a scale approaching a mass extinction. The aftermath of this loss reshaped the planet. With the great herbivores gone, vegetation patterns changed dramatically. In the Americas, the loss of giant grazers and browsers may have contributed to the spread of flammable woodlands and increased wildfires. The mammoth steppe, once maintained by the feeding and trampling of megafauna, transformed into less productive mossy tundra and forest, potentially releasing stored carbon and altering the global climate. The world became greener, but emptier of giants. The psychological impact on early humans must have been immense. The creatures that dominated their myths, their art, and their survival, the sources of immense wealth of meat, bone, and hide, were vanishing within generations. This event blurs the line between natural history and human history. It marks the point where our species stopped being just another part of the ecosystem and began to become a geological force. The megafauna were the first major casualties of the human age, though we did not understand it at the time. As the sounds of the icy steppe fade, listen for a new sound beneath the wind. The crackle of a human campfire, the soft murmur of voices, the careful chip of stone on stone. It is the sound of a new kind of intelligence on the planet, one whose relationship with the giants would be tragically short, and whose legacy of change was just beginning. We stand now at a precipice of understanding, looking back at two profound moments of loss and forward into an uncertain future. The stories of the KPG and quaternary extinctions are not just tales of the past. They are mirrors reflecting our present and cautionary tales for our future. They teach us about the resilience and the fragility of life, about the forces that govern existence on this planet, and about the unique, terrifying responsibility that comes with consciousness. Let us first distill the lessons from the deep past. The asteroid impact teaches humility. It demonstrates that no matter how dominant, how perfectly adapted, or how ecologically entrenched a group of organisms may be, its fate is tied to the stability of its world. The dinosaurs were the ultimate success story for over 180 million years. They survived shifts in climate, changes in continents, and competition among themselves. But they could not survive a fundamental, rapid alteration of the planet's very atmosphere and energy flow. Their extinction reminds us that life exists at the mercy of planetary physics and cosmic chance. The megafauna extinction teaches connection and consequence. It shows that a single species, when equipped with intelligence, technology, and social cooperation, can become a force comparable to an asteroid or volcanism in its impact on other life forms. It blurs the line between natural and human-caused extinction. It forces us to acknowledge that our rise as a global species came at a direct cost to the biological majesty that preceded us. We are not separate from nature. We are its most potent and often most disruptive current expression. Now, turn your gaze to the present. We are living in what many scientists call the Anthropocene, a new geological epoch defined by human influence. The rate of species extinction today is estimated to be tens to hundreds of times higher than the natural background rate. We are not hunting giants with spears, but we are destroying habitats, altering the climate, polluting ecosystems, and transporting invasive species at an unprecedented scale. The current wave of extinction lacks the single, dramatic cause of an asteroid, but its cumulative effect may be just as profound. The parallels are chilling. Like the dinosaurs, countless species today are exquisitely adapted to a specific, stable world, a world that is now changing faster than they can evolve. Like the megafauna, they face a powerful, global agent of change, us. But unlike our ancestors, we have the gift of foresight. We can read the fossil record. We can understand the causes of past extinctions. We can see the patterns repeating. This knowledge is not a burden. It is a responsibility and an opportunity. We are the first species on Earth that can choose to alter its impact consciously. The dinosaurs had no choice. The mammoths had no choice. We do. So, what do we do with this understanding? We can choose to see ourselves not as conquerors of nature, but as its stewards. We can work to preserve the remaining giants, the elephants, whales, tigers, and great apes, not just as relics, but as functional parts of healthy ecosystems. We can mitigate climate change, protect wild spaces, and create a world where the human economy operates within ecological boundaries. In essence, we can choose to write a different ending to the current chapter of loss. As this series concludes, let the stories of the Cambrian weirdos, the marine reptiles, the pterosaurs, the dinosaurs, and the megafauna settle in your mind not as a sad litany of endings, but as a celebration of the incredible creativity of life. Each was a masterpiece of evolution, a unique solution to the puzzle of existence. Their disappearances were tragedies, but they also made space for new forms, including, ultimately, us. You are part of this unbroken chain. You breathe oxygen produced by plants whose ancestors survived the KPG impact. You walk on lands shaped by the footfalls of mammoths. You are a conscious product of 3.5 billion years of evolutionary trial, error, and triumph. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep. Carry with you a sense of awe for what has been, a sober respect for the forces of change, and a quiet hope for what can be. The Earth's story is not over. We are writing it now. We can choose to make it a story of continued diversity, of coexistence, of wisdom learned from the deep past. Let the final sound you hear be one not of endings, but of continuity, the gentle, steady rhythm of your own heart. It is the same rhythm of life that pulsed in the first cell, that beat in the chest of a T-Rex, that thrummed in the great vessels of a mammoth. It is the rhythm of a survivor, connected to all that came before. It is the rhythm of a storyteller who now holds the pen. Good night.